2001, McCarthy had over 10,000 employees, 1,100 retail outlets. We owed 8 banks 1.5 billion rand, and we were technically insolvent. We had a share price that had plummeted from a high of 21 rand in 1998 to a low of 18 cents in 2001. I learned more about leadership. I learned more about the responsibility of leadership during those difficult days. So what did I learn? First lesson I learned is that if you want to become an inspirational leader, you want to become more effective at the art and science of leadership, then you should regard leadership not as a right, but as a responsibility. Perhaps I can put it differently by saying the leaders I admire regard it as a privilege to lead. And they realize that they have to earn the moral mandate to lead on a perpetual basis. They can't just demand or instruct people to trust them, to have confidence in them. Second lesson I learned is there's a big difference between managing people and leading people. Much easier to manage people, to plan their activities, to organize them, and then what we enjoy doing, to control them. But well-managed people aren't necessarily motivated and inspired. They are very regimented. They tend to be highly disciplined, but they don't volunteer their commitment. In many instances, there's just reluctant compliance. So I ask myself the question at regular intervals, Bront, how much time and energy are you investing in your leadership task, and how much time and energy are you investing in your task as a manager of people? Because what I observe is that many businesses, many organizations are overmanaged and underled. Both disciplines are very important. Leadership when it comes to providing direction, when it comes to inspiring people, motivating them. And management when it comes to execution, to productivity, to efficiency. So what are the differences? Leaders focus on tomorrow, and managers tend to focus on today. Managers deal with complexity. Leaders drive change. Managers micromanage and control, and leaders inspire and trust. Perhaps I can summarize it by saying that leaders do the right things in terms of strategy and principles and values, and managers do things right. That's our task. We have to do the right things, and we have to do things right.
Yet now we find ourselves in a very different space. Every 5 years, there's a regular, free and fair elections, and every time the election just gets better and better. And every time, there's always someone who will squeal, you know. This wasn't perfect, that wasn't perfect. But the fact of the matter is, we have regular, free and fair elections, and it's some of the best run elections in the world. And I believe we've got very good reason to feel good about what we have built in a very short 20 years. We've built here what takes nations centuries to build. But we should never become complacent by taking our achievements for granted, because we can lose it, as is evident in many countries with whom we rejoiced when they achieved freedom. Nor should we forget that our freedom is not complete. There's still much that needs to change, and the lack of change is a time bomb. Every now and then, we have small explosions in the form of the service delivery protests and strikes. And they will get worse if we don't deal with the root problems. Now, I've parked all these reminders to ourselves because we need them when we get completely overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of the outstanding tasks and by the determined efforts by some to roll back these achievements that we celebrate and treasure. And I want us to take those victories and achievements and hold them very close to our hearts so that we can draw courage for the next few miles that we have to walk. So, beyond the vote, what do we have? Quite a lot, actually. Today, I believe our country is a much better place. Our economy is bigger and better. Our institutions are generally regarded as world-class, be they our financial services, our courts, our media, or our ability to host world-class events that manage to find a great balance between being highly effective and efficient and at the same time being warm and buckets of fun. I mean, 2010, we know how to throw a party. And I hope you've got it in your diary to go ping for next week. You have to watch the opening game, Thursday night, 8 o'clock. So, and then we'll see whether Brazil can throw a better party than we can. I bet you they don't. We have an abundance of natural resources. We've got a spectacularly beautiful country that is increasingly recognized as a world-class must-do tourism destination. We have great academic institutions that have produced people capable of world-class science and technology and innovation. We have world-class medical facilities and academic institutions. But there's a gap. All of this has not translated into benefits for all. There are millions of people who live the most appalling lives in this country. And how do we mind this gap? Now, we in this room are all leaders in various constituent parts of society, be they in our homes, in our communities, in our workplaces. And the thing about leaders is that good leaders lead. You don't sit there in the group. You lead, and you lead from the front. We need to be bold and assess what we have, where we need to go, and how to get there. And this is not a lottery where we have a luxury to hope. Start a chance. It's not that. It's not that we don't have the luxury to just sit and hope and pray. My call to you, and Gala, this is my point, is to re-empower ourselves if we have abdicated that. This is actually a country of great opportunity if we just use the tools we have in our hands. We have the finest constitution in the world. We actually have formal processes to engage with our elected leaders, regardless what parties they are, we've elected them. And we have formal ways to engage with the law and the policy-making process. At best, I believe that most people who have availed themselves for the various legislatures and who stood for election are actually good people. Most people are actually good people. Now, at worst, I do know and accept fully that there are some really nasty, lazy ones as well. Some who are dishonest and who just don't give a damn or care about people. But I want us to focus on the fact that how do we work with those who really care and who take their mandate seriously? And this is an aspect of democracy that really worries me that I don't think we as South Africans have actually taken up. I wonder how many people in this room have ever gone to Parliament or to the Council of Provinces and made a submission.
Then I talk about her voice and the things we did as her voice, and that's also part of trying to maintain or retain the legacies that have been trampled upon today. I talk about the kinds of things we did for Head Voice, and the BHEAD we had, the bold, audacious goal we had in terms of taking South Africa to the world, and some of the amazing campaigns we ran as Head Voice, some of the changes we did, whether it was launching the TRC or launching the new airline for South African Airways and those kind of things. So that's in the book, and then it goes on and talks about current issues. It talks about my role as the president of the Black Business Working Group, how I liaised with Thabo Mbeki when he was president, the various business leadership roles I played, and as also the president of the Black Business Executive Circle and so on. And so that's about the book. And the last chapter in the book, the last chapter, has to do with what we are about here today. And it's a chapter called Died in the Wool Hero. Just to make sure we understand each other, I kind of Googled the word death, not death, death. It's a noun that means a scarcity or lack of something. And Google talks about some synonyms for death. These are lack, scarcity, scarceness, shortage, shortfall, want, deficiency, insufficiency, inadequacy, paucity, a word that will appear later, sparseness, meagerness, scantiness, rareness, infrequency, uncommonness, and privation, and destitution. Death, that's what the term means, death. It's about all of those things, all of those synonyms. And before I get into taking you through this chapter in my book, the last chapter, a word of caution. When I talk about the death of leadership, I am in our country. I'm not just going to talk about political leadership, which is the obvious thing to do. I'm not going to, I keep coming in and out to myself, I can't sometimes hear myself. The batteries. You're fired. I was going to say, is that a BE company? I'd probably make the black audience nervous. Sorry guys, it's a typical white joke. I was talking about a word of caution, that I am not here to give succor or comfort to any racist notion or racial prejudice about the political leadership in our country. Now I'm going to talk a lot about that. I'm not here to give comfort to the kind of nonsense you have seen in the past week, where we had the DA MP called Waters calling black voters who voted for the ANC dogs. I'm not here for that. I don't support that. I'm totally opposed to that. I'm also not here to give comfort to those who love the ad that calls the people who voted for the ANC poopoles. And that's not what I'm here to talk about or give comfort to. So let's be perfectly clear about that. And that leads to my subject, the death of a leadership in our country. You'll get to see very quickly that I'm not careful. I don't like to be careful. I like to speak my mind. So I say in my book, it's chapter 22, Died in the World. Like all South Africans, I was totally shocked by the events at Marikana. I had read in the Star about what newspapers called the man in the green blanket. I was completely fascinated and enamored with this brave man. When he was shot, I was moved to pay tribute to him and make a statement on the current paucity of leadership in our country. Pharaoh Hafajiri, the editor of the City Press, was kind enough to publish this piece, and it appeared in the Sunday Times, in the City Press, I think some month and a half after Americana. And you will tell me after I've gone through it if it's relevant or not, and I think still is appropriate, particularly in terms of what's happening right now in Americana. The piece is titled Tribute to a Leader. And I said in the piece, the man in the green blanket had a name, a family, and conviction. As it turns out, the man in the green blanket, who was mowed down by the police in Marikana, had a name, Mgcineni Mambush Noki. He was a 34-year-old married father from Tanduli in the Eastern Cape. He could easily have come from Epai, but he came from Tanduli. But it was not just the color of his blanket that made Mgcineni stand out. He appeared tall, dignified, confident, and regal in demeanor. It is reported that he was the loudest leader and never needed a loud hailer to address the crowd. People say, quote, he didn't speak for himself. He spoke for the workers, unquote.
And the secret of franchising for us is that those stores are owned by individuals, a lot of them who used to be ex-Pick n Pay corporate people, who've gone out there, put their own capital, put their family to work, and are making it work. They run it more efficiently often than a corporate store. They make more profit per square meter than a corporate store because it's owner managed and the people are in the stores operating it. Unfortunately, when you get a big corporate involved in things, you've got audit committees and you've got boards and you've got governance committees and social ethics committee meetings and you've got remuneration committee meetings and you've got, I don't know how many others. And how much time do we spend in meetings talking about doing business? And how little time do we actually spend actually doing business? I was looking this week. I've got 6 board meetings this week. Not much of that is going to be constructive, making money time. And that is the challenge that we all face in business today, is how do we get ourselves away from the clutter and into the coalface? Because that is the real challenge that's facing this country. It applies to business, it applies to local government, it applies to national government. Because we are spending too much time focusing on the stuff that's important, but doesn't actually make a difference to a lot of people. You know, I was up here a couple of weeks ago, and Russell Booth, is he here? Is Russell here? Anyway, Russell, who's one of our regional managers here, his son now works for us, it's a generational type thing. And he gave me a copy of the Pick n Pay annual report for 1970. We were a listed company in those days. And the annual report was 8 pages. But what's funny about it is that in those days it used to have to be in English and Afrikaans, so we're now down to 4 pages. We then had a front page with a picture of my father and a little message this long, and it was only the size, it was only that size. So we're now down to 3 pages, and that was adequate in those days. We had our AGM on Monday in Cape Town, and we had our new book out. It was this thick, literally that thick, of an A4 size paper, and I tried reading this thing, and I do know how to read a balance sheet. This thing is gobbledygook and garbage. And all it does is make money for lawyers and accountants and those people, but it doesn't add real value to the business. For me, corporate governance is absolutely critical. But the mistake that we're all making around corporate governance is that we hide behind the message of comply or explain. If you talk to Mervyn King, he says it's absolutely not that. And he's the guy who wrote the stuff. He said it's apply or explain. So you don't have to do everything that's in that list, but if you don't do it, you have to say why you're not doing it. And that's fair. But we hide behind it, and the analysts and the market makers all come and say, you're not doing this, you're not doing that, in terms of King. We'll say we don't have to do it. We're telling you why we're not doing it. And I think if we get more and more discussion around those issues, I think that we're going to get a far better and more productive business and economy that's going on in the country.